Hello and welcome wherever you might be to our complimentary webinar, which is brought to you today in partnership with Verint, Auscontact's national platinum sponsor, and it's entitled Adapting to Our New World, How Knowledge Management Can Help in a Crisis. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's special guest, Heather Richards, Vice President KM Product Strategy and GTM at Verint, we hope to have you totally engrossed in the conversation as well as spark your interest, and of course there will be a Q&A at the end of the session. I'm Fiona Keogh, CEO of Auscontact and your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, let's use the time to quickly run through some housekeeping with you. Remember, it's important to interact with us to maximise the benefit, and as you know, there's no need to take too many notes because we'll be providing you with the slides and the recording of the webinar. To interact with us, please use the questions pane on the control panel. You can ask questions or make comments for Heather or myself from time to time. Don't forget, we're going to have a full Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so please type your questions as we go along, or else if you're anything like me, you'll forget to ask them. I know that many of you are familiar with asking questions, but let's just try out the Q&A tab on the control panel just in case. And the question for today is, of course, I always like to ask a trick question. When did you start working from home? So, Heather, I'm going to call you in just a little bit now and just see when you started working from home, or are you working from home?
I am working from home. I'm sat here in my living room right now, and I've been working from home for the last 7 weeks now. It feels probably a lot longer than that. Before that, occasionally, but permanently, the last 7 weeks.
Wow, well, you're doing much better than we are here at Auscontact. We only really started on the week of the 16th of March, and it's a little bit different. So most people are saying, so we've got a 7 weeks or so, we've got a mid-March, so it's really interesting. All round about the same time, we kicked off. Stacey, thank you. You started on the 19th of March. Brilliant. So March seems to be about the right time for people to have kicked off. It'll be interesting to see when we come back, and Rohan as well is the 19th. Oh, and Paul's asked a question. Bless him. Very cheeky so early on. Who finds they're working a lot longer at home and in some ways more productive? But we'll leave that till a little bit later. So we need to keep moving along. If you're listening through headphones or speakers and experience any issues with your internet connection, please note that you can raise your hand, and then of course you can switch to the telephone and the toll-free number for your country or state with the access code. And you can also go back to the original link, which will have all of that in it. And someone, of course, from Auscontact will be rushing to your aid. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our new voice, Heather Richards, because we haven't had Heather on a webinar with us before. And I'm very excited to share that Heather has extensive experience in consultancy through leadership with knowledge management and CX markets. She's held strategic roles within the knowledge management industry for the last 20 years. I didn't think KM was around for that long, so that's really interesting. And prior to Verint, Heather was also CEO of Transversal, a pioneer in AI-based knowledge management. And I know, Heather, you are doing us an enormous favour by being up at 1 a.m. Oh my goodness. So I think that coffee's probably kicked in. And with that,
I hope so.
I can hear it in your voice. I can feel the energy already. That's brilliant. I think we have some work for our attendees to do. No? Heather's going to speak a little bit for now. Thanks, Heather. All yours.
No worries. Thank you for the introduction. I want to talk just a bit about the changes we're seeing in the world. First, just in the customer engagement market generally, we've seen a lot of change in the last few years. Leading this change has been the proliferation of technology, also the amount of data available, the combination of which has really made the way of AI and automation that we're seeing possible. And if we look at changes in the workforce, and we've touched on some of those, a lot of these changes are reflected not just in workplaces, but also the employees, their expectations. There's a gig economy now that didn't exist even a few years ago. A lot more home workers, virtual contact centers, the expectation that not everyone is in the same job for longer than 2 or 3 years. And then looking at the current situation, as you're saying, where a lot of us have found ourselves working at home where we hadn't previously. With many contact centers now almost 100% virtual. Now, this was a trend that I saw happening probably over the last few years, but this current pandemic has really accelerated that. And absolutely now, when we're looking at digital transformation and technologies, what I want to talk about specifically is how knowledge management can help us address all of these changes that are happening around us.
So we're going to ask everybody to do a little bit of work now by answering a poll question. Jess, if you could launch, what's the biggest concern for managing for work from home agents? Is it granting access to all knowledge sources, or sending and tracking key business communications, training existing employees on new procedures, onboarding and training new employees, or ensuring compliance? Heather, while everyone's answering, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
From your perspective with your existing customers, has the work from home transition been easy for them? And then what changes did they have to make?
Sure. I think that the question of whether it's been easy or not really depends on if there were any home working arrangements pre the enforced ones. I've had some customers that already had sort of flexible working policies. They were already exploring that virtual contact center that I was talking about. And for them, the transition has not been as difficult. In terms of changes, though, I think all organizations, regardless of whether they've been, using some at work or working from home practices or not, it's really having to prioritize what they're going to look at enabling first. Which groups of employees, which information, et cetera, because no company with the best tool in the world can just push a button and magically adopt a completely new working environment. So what I've seen in terms of changes has been the level and detail of prioritization to make it possible.
Wow. So Jess, if you could share the results of the poll with all of us. Wow, it's a pretty even split, but the only standout, or the clearest standout, is ensuring compliance. So maybe we've got a lot of banking and finance people on the webinar, I don't know. But I guess in Australia, with the factor of the Royal Commission, and that's actually transcended just banking and finance, it's pretty much gone across all verticals. So interestingly, the least popular has been granting access to all internal knowledge sources. So that's probably a really good thing to see, Heather.
I would think so, and it goes back to that prioritization. I think what I've seen definitely is that people have come to the realization that not everyone needs access to every system that they had access to before, and knowledge as well. And it's about granting the right access to the right people. That really drives efficiency.
Fantastic. Well, Jess, let's progress on. Over to you, Heather.
Right, thank you. So what I want to do is really look at how effective knowledge management can help us all adapt and respond. We've talked sort of about the unprecedented times, and we're all absolutely adapting. And what I've seen, particularly with our existing customers, is they're really being forced into a situation where they're finding creative approaches to these new business problems. And sometimes that means making the most of what you already have in your kit bag, as it were. And sometimes it means looking to see what other tools you need in order to approach those problems. But there's definitely a lot of creativity going on in terms of how people are approaching those business problems. I think the reason that knowledge management fits so well into that category is the number of ways in which it can actually be deployed, to different situations and different audiences. So I want to talk a bit about knowledge for our customers. Then I'm going to go on to knowledge for employees, also management, and give some examples as to what I've seen in terms of our customer base and the market using knowledge management effectively. So if we begin by talking about some of the challenges our customers may be facing, that they're potentially in completely different personal circumstances now than they were only a month or so ago. They'll probably have different circumstances, new requests, and different questions, some of which will be used to hearing, and some will be completely different. They're likely to want a different type of conversation, more personalization. It may be about emotive subjects, and self-service requirements have changed as well. What I've seen is that a lot of customers now have the same questions they did before, but the answers are completely different. And sometimes those answers are changing quite rapidly. If we look at employees, really, there are many people working from home now for which it's a brand new experience. And many employees really have the dual challenge of having to shift to an at-home model, as well as undergo new training and support. We have agents now working entirely from home. Some of them have never experienced this. They're not necessarily used to the change. That tribal knowledge that they had access to, i.e. the person sitting next to them, is no longer there. And there's really been an increase in volumes in certain areas and probably decreases in others, which means the skill sets that they had pre-working from home may not be particularly attuned to the situation that they find themselves in. Remote workers need help from business across the board, so it could be IT, help desk, HR, and those departments are also dealing with issues in regards to working from home. And so really cloud-based knowledge management can address a lot of these challenges, because what it does is provides a way for home agents to access relevant information in real time. And it also addresses the issue of providing agents easy and consumable information on subjects that they're not necessarily used to supporting. Now, if we look at knowledge for management, it's a really different perspective, because what I've seen is a lot of people managing teams are now suddenly looking at these teams that are required to be multi-skilled. Suddenly they're bringing on additional team members. There's been a lot of expansion in terms of the number of agents required in some cases, just because of the influx of customer queries. And that may be easier in the contact center to deal with onboarding, but very tricky when everyone's working from home, particularly from the beginning. They're trying to look at changes in communication. Teams themselves can't communicate sometimes with one another. If team members relied on printed materials, and yes, that still happens. I've still, seen stacks of laminates in multiple contact centers. And the content and information the agents need is changing a lot. And so that's an issue for managers as to how do I actually get that information to my employees in a consistent and consolidated way. And I think the last thing that I've seen, which is interesting, is that there have been really a shift in the KPIs, and perhaps for very good reason. For example, average handling times may have increased because the nature of the conversation you need to have with customers is more complex or emotive. But also making sure that first call resolution is happening is probably even more crucial, because you may not have the same systems in place to be passing customers seamlessly in a way that they expect, from one channel to another. So if we look at how knowledge can actually help these things, what we're looking to do is actually provide assistance to customers, employees, and managers at the same time, but also consistently. A way to consolidate that sort of tacit and tribal knowledge that was once fragmented across the workforce. But if you're sitting next to somebody, that doesn't necessarily make much difference. But also be looking at ways in which we can address all of these challenges, which we're very familiar with, but be flexible enough to be putting systems in place that support us now, but also into the future. Because I think more and more there's the realization that while exactly the situation we're in may not be the new normal, it may not be too far off, and you don't want to be investing huge amounts of time and energy and money now if it's not something that can be future-proofed to actually grow with your digital transformation strategies going into the future. So I like to look at knowledge management as the idea of knowledge as a service. And key to that, key to kind of future-proofing your investment in knowledge is making sure that you have a single knowledge platform that can actually be surfacing the right information to the right audience at the right time, regardless of channel. And, obviously your customers are going to need access to different information than your agents or, people in HR or back office. But if you can use the same platform to actually manage all of that information and then start surfacing the correct information to the right people through the correct channel. That saves a lot of pain in terms of trying to figure out where those silos are, and it also allows you to start onboarding one audience at a time, as it were, and start applying knowledge to where those crunch points are within your business now, knowing that you can also expand moving forward into the future. So key to all of this is really one fundamental that I like to look at in terms of how we approach knowledge management, which is we're always looking for ways to automate the creation, consumption, and sharing of knowledge. And ways in which this is done are, a few different ways. So some through technology, some through approach. So at the heart of what we have is a knowledge management system that is cloud deployed. It's a cognitive knowledge platform, really low effort for deployment and curation. So a low total cost of ownership. And the platform actually takes the heavy lifting of tagging or linking concepts away from your team so they can actually focus on the job. The search technology understands what's being looked for out of the box with no additional admin effort, which means that it does work from day one. You can minimize the IT or technical resource to actually deploy it, and it can work as a standalone solution, particularly if you want something up and running quickly to deal with a lot of the pains you may be facing now, but also integrated, for example, into existing CRM or desktop solutions. And so you have the flexibility to actually adapt and grow the knowledge management system along with any issues that you may be experiencing as a business. So it's flexible, we can deploy quickly now, but it's going to evolve when, times may be a bit quieter to cater for multi-channel, multi-audience, different user experiences. And we're happy to assist with best practice, consultation and expertise. So I want to drill a bit more into the customer perspective that I was talking about, and go through a few examples and show how we can actually assist customers by using knowledge management in a self-service scenario and actually allowing their customers to find the best way to connect with us. Now, the first area to look at is probably quite a simple one. With increasing demands on businesses to address key issues involved with the pandemic, really having a dedicated area for all of that knowledge is key to be able to address, public demands in a self-service capacity. And many of our existing clients have actually just added dedicated categories to their knowledge system, or dedicated filtering, to allow customers to rapidly find the information that they need in one clear defined area. And it's often referenced or linked to from other areas of the website or other contact channels. And that allows the customer to very quickly self-serve if that's what they want to do, if that's the approach. Now, we can also start automating the injection of what we call contextual knowledge directly into existing customer journeys. And here's an example from one of our customers, which is Fidelity Investments. And this means that if me as a customer, if I'm going through a normal user journey on the website or app, different information, sort of clues from my user journey are absorbed and then fed into the knowledge management system and then serve back relevant, appropriate knowledge to me with really zero effort. So it means that I can continue my journey uninterrupted without needing to navigate to sort of, help as a destination on the website or even perform a search. The information is just being pushed to me as I'm browsing. And we call this zero-click knowledge. So if you can assist customers without them even needing to ask the question, there's really no better way to decrease the effort and improve user experience than that. An example here, which is from Sainsbury's Retail Group, which is a very large European retailer. They're using decision trees straight out of their knowledge management system to provide really a contact triage. And it's really important for them as their contact center is under huge demand right now, as you can imagine, with a lot of people now shifting to doing all of their shopping online. So their customers can make specific selections about what they need to contact them about, and it filters down to a very specific channel, a phone number, email, online help, whatever is relevant to their specific situation. But crucially, with all of these flows, the organization themselves, Sainsbury's, are in complete control via their KM system. They can adjust the flow, the paths, the outcomes, all through a simple graphical editor. And they can adapt and change based on the inbound demands. So in terms of escalation paths, they themselves are in complete control over that without having to do any web development at all. And that's quite critical right now because, as we were saying, a lot of the answers to customer questions are literally changing hour by hour, depending on, for example, government guidelines that are being put into place. So, of course, customers still need to reach you, and it's really important that they're able to. But what we're trying to do is actually look and see, okay, how do we actually help this self-help journey in particular if a customer decides to send you an email, for example. Here, what we're doing is providing contextual knowledge as the customer actually fills in an email submission form. So in many cases, just by typing in their message, the information they may need is proactively pushed to them. And it actually means that at the end that they don't have to submit that email. So in terms of contact deflection, it's a self-service approach that's quite unobtrusive. You're allowing the customer to go through the channel of their choice, but also then providing possible information based contextually on the information that they're looking for. Now, the next thing I want to look at is an employee perspective, and a lot of this has to do with the working from home angle that we've been discussing. Really at the heart of our KM solution is the cognitive search engine, which allows customers or agents the ability to search using their own terminology and still get the answers they're looking for. Sort of it knows what you mean, not what you're saying. And this is really crucial for the ability of a changing workforce to adapt to new demands, especially with very limited training times. So in this example, you can see that somebody's searching for a longer mortgage. It understands what we're looking for, regardless of the term that we're using, without any administration to train or tag up the terms. It also starts automatically clustering related content around what I'm looking for. And again, this is done all on the fly. So as you add knowledge to the knowledge base, delete knowledge out, that related content adapts in real time without the need for any additional tagging. And this actually reduces the skill or experience to manage the knowledge, but I think more importantly, in terms of being able to train agents and new employees and multi-skill employees, it's really key because it allows them to see the relevant information immediately without having to do continual searches if they're unfamiliar with the subject. So you're able to, cross-skill or even multi-skill agents more quickly. And to illustrate that, one of our customers, Wolseley, was actually able to increase the number of brands or work streams that their agents were able to deal with from 2 to 10 by using this technology, and actually reduce their training time, their onboarding time for new contact center employees by a third. So we saw decision trees earlier for customers in a self-service scenario, but think about what processes are used the most, for example, within a contact center, or could take long to complete. And decision trees can really reduce the effort and experience required to process a lot of complex workflows in many cases. A wider view on the efficiency of KM. One of our customers, utility warehouse, were actually able to increase their talk time, which at that point was desired because what they're looking to do is actually be able to have those more complicated, complex conversations with customers really in time of need, but actually at the same time decrease the average handling time because of the efficiencies that their agents were able to gain through just going through the correct processes through the decision trees built within their KM system. So with remote workers now the default, what we've seen is that reliance on tools for communication, kind of rather than huddles or team meetings is quite important as well. And what you need to do is actually deliver communication centrally, but in a consistent, compliant way. And so even more important, I think, with the remote workforce is ensuring that any changes are understood. So here you can see agents can actually see how many items that they need to read are outstanding, what they need to do to consume at the beginning of the shift, and it allows any team lead to actually see directly the impact of those communications. And this bi-directional feedback is really important in terms of providing connections with your teams. And we've actually seen huge increases in employee engagement, quite ironically, from a lot of our customers using KM to assist working from home. And what they're finding is they're actually getting more feedback and input from their employees because they're very quick and easy ways to sort of foster that communication. So we've seen a lot about how pushing knowledge out to remote workers can assist, but I think even more so that whole workflow, the information flowing back is just as important. So, when agents used to be sitting together in teams, being able to lean over and ask for assistance, back office employees or even the HR help desk, if those people are getting asked questions by colleagues or customers and the answer doesn't exist, they need a really quick way to provide feedback. And you can see here what Sainsbury's is doing is actually they have predefined tags that agents or employees can simply tick to give information back to the person managing the knowledge base. And it's a really simple way to start giving feedback and actually make sure that employees feel engaged and empowered in terms of adding to the knowledge base themselves. And this actually enables sort of that tacit tribal knowledge to be captured permanently and then accessed by everyone. So before I go on to talking in a bit more detail about things from a management perspective, I think we have another poll.
We do indeed, and Jess, if you could launch the poll, that would be great. And the question is, with more customers choosing to explore online resources first, do you see a change in your customer inquiries? Are customers struggling to find answers to their basic questions, or are customers needing guidance in fulfilling online self-service, or customers need answers to their unique situations, or there's actually no change? Still receiving the same type of inquiries, but just more of it. Heather, what drives change to knowledge systems and how frequently do organisations have to make changes?
I guess it depends on whether you're talking about changing the entire platform they're using or actually changing the information within their existing knowledge management system. If you're looking at changes to your existing knowledge base, I think what you really need is technology that enables you to change it, well, constantly. I think what really has to be appreciated is that knowledge management done correctly is not something that's deployed and then you forget about it. You absolutely need the tools that allow you to start capturing any of that tacit tribal knowledge that we were talking about and turn it into curated knowledge. And there's got to be that feedback loop. It then starts growing organically based on the questions that people actually have and need answers to, rather than what you may have presumed at the start of the project. And so I think that's really key, is you've got to have the capacity within whatever KM system you're using that allows you to do that.
Right. Okay, Jess, well, why don't you close the poll and let's see what the biggest challenge is at the moment. Wow, there's an absolute standout, Heather. Customers need answers to their unique situations. So, I mean, I guess that's not really a surprise because given where we are today, there would be some quite unique situations that people are actually experiencing with having to pivot quite radically in their day-to-day lives as well as their work life. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think as well, when we were sort of looking at questions before about concern in terms of compliance in regulated industries, there are a lot of questions that are very unique, that need personalized answers, which I think really goes to show how you need that combination of personalization, but also a way to upskill agents that may not have had to deal with those personalized conversations before either, and to make sure that they have the information they need to have a sensible, compassionate conversation with those customers.
Yeah, I think what's gratifying too, Heather, is to see that we seem to have mastered, in inverted commas, providing the answers to basic questions, which I think speaks well of progress in the self-service area. Okay, well, with that, back to you.
Great, thank you. So in terms of looking just generally, I think from a management perspective, I think it's really critical for the management of knowledge at speed. Because what that does is actually decreases the total cost of ownership and really ease of curation. So this is a great quote, I think, from one of our customers, BMW, which really illustrates that we differentiate in this area by actually reducing the effort involved. So when I was talking about one of the key things we're trying to do regardless of the use case is look at ways of automating the creation, consumption, and sharing of knowledge. One of the ways that we do that, and I showed an example, is by knowledge clustering, which is entirely automatic, requiring no manual effort. And now more than ever, we actually need solutions that can get up to speed very quickly, can be maintained with minimal effort, that allow you to add and change, the answers to very common questions as you need to, and have that picked up in real time, but by the people that are trying to consume that knowledge. So with the ease of use, there needs to also be clarity and visibility. We need to be able to see how knowledge is performing, what's missing. And so what we do is allow you to see really a bird's eye view of the performance of your knowledge, but then also deep dive into it if you want, sort of filtering by what you want to see. And this allows you to be able to check how knowledge is being consumed individually, but also even by teams, for example. So you can look at reports that show knowledge usage on a per user level, so you can check and maintain that level of adoption is there, even when staff are at home, and actually even within the context of getting the feedback that we were talking about as well. One of the things that we're really trying to do is encourage suggestions and feedback. We need to be able to absorb as much of that tacit knowledge as possible that's in our agent's head, so that everyone can benefit. And it's not just a case of taking suggestions and then dealing with them. They need to be a way to actually be then curated back into the knowledge base itself. Now, it's often underutilized, but our client utility warehouse are actually, one of the things they're most proud of is the feedback and participation that they're getting, sort of the employee buy-in. And since they went live, they've had over 20,000 responses from their agent in terms of providing feedback, which is then used to help build and grow the knowledge base. And so what they're doing is actually allowing the knowledge to grow and improve based on the real questions that both their agents and customers have. Now, compliance is a huge issue. And what's really important, I think, is with all of these changes happening at pace, that we really don't want the accuracy or quality of content to be affected. So ensuring approvals met, auditability is retained, are all very key things. So we provide sort of flexible, multi-tiered approval workflows. It can be different depending on the category that the knowledge is in. It could be that your COVID-19 content needs an extra layer of approval before it goes out to agents, for example, or some of those agent notices or things going out to customers in terms of alerts. And any changes made have to be retained so that every article has a permanent record of any feedback, changes, who made them. And that way you can rapidly enable access for new teams, knowing that the information they have for particular sets of content is actually secure and compliant. So we've talked sort of a lot about the situation that we're in now, home working, et cetera, but I think it's really important to start looking into the future as well. And sort of looking at how some of our customers are utilizing our knowledge management technology now, but also planning for the future. So if you look at Equinity, which is a leading specialist in technology, finance, and administrative services in really complex and regulated markets, what they saw was up to a 50% increase in inbound calls due to COVID-19. This was over a matter of a couple of weeks. And one of the reasons is that a lot of their customers, they provide an online trading platform. So loads of questions about the volatility in the markets, pensions, et cetera. They had 2 days to redeploy and multi-skill agents. So redeploy agents from home and then multi-skill them to actually start taking a lot of these new questions. And what they said afterwards using our knowledge management was that they had the confidence that the agents had the information they needed to actually support their customers. Another example here, which is the Verint Group, one of the largest integrated retail and financial services providers. So they operate multiple online shopping brands alongside financing options. And so it's really a mixture of online retail and financial services. And what they said, that their knowledge management system from Verint really came into its own in terms of the cross-skilling agents, because they actually had a lot of people on the phones that weren't necessarily always doing the job of an agent, just to keep up demand with those customer queries that are coming in, particularly because what they're doing is all online. So, they're saying they're now cross-skilling agents to deal with multiple customer query types, and they're able to actually have the relevant processes and training and support even within the at-home model. Going back to BMW, BMW are actually acting in real time to their customers' questions. You see a lot of the questions here that have always been on their website in a self-service scenario, but the answers are completely different than they were probably 2 months ago. And they probably may continue to change, for example, with changes to government guidelines in terms of social distancing and things like that. So what I found really interesting is they're actually now providing different answers to the questions that were already there, but they have to have the ability and capacity to do that in real time. So the inbuilt flexibility in the knowledge, for example, having multiple answers to different questions, is really key. And it means that any changes that they make are immediately available to customers as well as employees. And it means that they're not putting a lot of effort into having to either teach the system what the right answer is after they've changed it, or a lot of effort in actually changing the answers at all. Now, this really takes us to the business case for here at Knowledge in a Crisis, but it's a business case that's relevant regardless. And I think particularly going forward, looking for how a lot of the issues that have been raised over the last month or so within all of our businesses can be sustained moving forward to support our employees and our customers. So proactively supporting customers, reducing effort, which I'm going to keep going back to, but I think that's so key, because if you can reduce effort, you're improving customer experience. But on the flip side, you're actually improving operational efficiencies as well. So reducing agent training time and then improving customer satisfaction, which is something that we're all trying to do regardless of the scenario we find our businesses in. So using knowledge management effectively now and looking at some of the fastest ways to deploy a knowledge management solution. One of the great features, I think, are the comprehensive analytics that provide an analysis of what gaps you may have in your knowledge, meaning that you can add relevant information now based on what your immediate demands are, but actually using that gap analysis, really start building out your knowledge management solution for the future as well. You can start small. You can start exactly where you need the demand or see the demand most, whether it's self-service, whether it's enabling agents to work from home, and know that whatever you're deploying now using knowledge management in a crisis, you're actually going to be able to adapt as you undergo more business as usual knowledge transformation needs as you're moving forward. With that, I'd like to open it up to questions and discussion.
Thanks so much, Heather. So everybody keep the questions coming through. We've got quite a few questions, Heather. So, we're going to get you working even harder because there's nothing quite like
Great.
going through questions without notice. So question number one that we have is from Daniela. And Daniela would like to know, she's done a little bit of preamble, encouraging employees to go to knowledge as a first point of reference. She's interested to hear your thoughts, Heather, on approaches to manage the employee engagement.
Yep, I think that really key, and where I've seen employee engagement very successful, is if you make sure that the employees feel as if they have influence on what knowledge is actually going to be there, if their comments are heard. So you've got to have that feedback loop, because as soon as they realize that they're active participants, almost participating in the curation of the tool that's being used by themselves and their peers, they're going to participate more. But it's got to be that full circle feedback loop, as opposed to presented as, here is your knowledge, now please consume it.
Would you offer some form of reward and recognition to people that provide feedback, or is it more just a thank you, Heather? What are you saying?
I think it really depends on the culture of your organization. I mean, I've seen everything literally from the person that submits the most relevant questions that end up being published wins a bottle of wine at the end of the month, all the way through to KM integrated into communities forums, where it's basically that social kudos. If your community answer gets voted up to the top and ends up being turned into curated knowledge, and keep it sort of turned into a gamification situation at that point. So I really think it depends on what the culture of your organization is, and then really strive to adapt whatever reward or gamification system you want to introduce to the knowledge to suit that.
Fantastic. So we have an anonymous question. Don't you love those? So Heather, in your experience, have you or a client managed duplication of communication between the knowledge management system with an enterprise social tool, for example, Citrian or Workplace? How do you ensure the information is in one place so people don't have to stop and think and search multiple sources?
Yep, so that could be done in a couple of different ways. The first thing I would say is, if you're using a knowledge management system, sort of don't think of it as knowledge management. I like to say everything is knowledge. And I like this idea of information to knowledge. So the search should be able to search both your curated knowledge and maybe communities, as you were just saying. But the key there is not just leaving it as really a federated search, but have a mechanism that allows you to identify which of those community discussions are most relevant and can then be turned into curated knowledge. So the first thing is make things findable and searchable, regardless of the silo, but have a work path that allows anything that's useful that's sitting outside of curated knowledge to become part of that. That's really key just for the simplification and management of the information, but it also means you can then start reusing it. If you have curated knowledge in a structured data set, you can then start using that as the basis, for example, of your IVA. You can start surfacing information to different groups within your organization, all from the same knowledge base.
Cool. Paul's got a question, but he needs to start with a provocative statement for you, Heather. So he says, for agents, search is a poor approach to modern knowledge management. For example, it requires effort, it impacts on AHT. His question is, do you have a predictive knowledge management tool that listens to the call or the chat real time and presents the right knowledge management article to the agent real time? A bit like next best action, but in knowledge management.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the first thing I would say is I agree that search is a poor tool, which is why I don't like to, I guess, emphasize or focus on search as the mechanism for knowledge retrieval. And it goes back to the idea I was talking about in terms of zero-click knowledge. The most efficient way to give somebody the answer to a question is to provide that answer before they have asked the question. So if you can integrate, for example, your calls that are coming in using real-time speech analytics with your knowledge base, there's absolutely no reason that knowledge can't then be pushed to agents based on the conversations they're having in real time. Likewise, if it's integrated directly into your CRM system, as agents are filling out a case, relevant knowledge can be pushed to them based on the information that they've got to enter into the system anyway. And I think more and more, that's absolutely where knowledge management is going. I guess what I would say is if what you're trying to do is implement something quickly, for example, to address COVID-19 work-at-home issues, the strength of our knowledge platform is it can be deployed very quickly in weeks, almost as a standalone solution, but then absolutely be integrated into the processes you're talking about with real-time speech, contextual knowledge with CRM, and other processes that already exist.
Fantastic. Another anonymous question, Heather. Do you have any tips to improve searchability of knowledge articles with keywords that agents have often mistyped or spelled incorrectly, yielding 0 results?
Yeah, I think in many cases, having a good spell check works very, very well. It also goes back into the question that I was just answering in terms of making sure that wherever possible, you're not dependent on an agent or anybody typing in a question to get an answer back. It's about providing that contextual information. And then looking at ways that you can, for example, use AI or analytics to anticipate what the person actually meant based on either previous searches or information that already exists within the knowledge base itself.
Right. Melissa's got a question for you as well. And she would like to know what tips you have for capturing tacit knowledge, especially in times when capacity and resourcing is a restraint and people may not feel comfortable using traditional methods such as documenting their knowledge through process diagrams or procedures.
Yeah, I think in terms of the tacit knowledge, a lot of it is having the tools to just monitor how people are actually consuming information, what it is that they're looking for, what articles are being looked at, and then going back to the idea of actually taking interactions within community environments and using those to decide and anticipate what needs to be turned into curated information. As much as you can do to automate that, as opposed to saying, yes, please, give me the information that you need, the better, particularly when people are very time pressed.
Absolutely, especially currently, we do know that people are particularly time poor. So we have some more anonymous questions and quite a few of them. So the anonymous question, or it's a double barrel one. Can my team create and manage all the knowledge in the system, or do we need to involve your team on an ongoing basis?
No, you can manage it all yourself, and I think that that's really important. Obviously, we provide consulting services, customer success, and all of those things. But those skills are really there to make sure that we're standing up a system that's going to meet your operational needs and expectations. Really key is providing a tool that's easy to use, that requires no external services for you to manage your own knowledge and information. And those examples that I gave you in terms of decision trees or no tagging, workflows, all of those are done and managed completely by the customers.
Excellent. Another anonymous question. You spoke very briefly about how long it takes to stand up the solution in a matter of weeks. And the question is, how quickly is that those weeks? Are we talking 4, 8, 12 weeks in your experience?
Yeah, so typical deployment is around 8 weeks. That can be shrunk if what you're looking for is almost a point solution. We've had a few customers come to us saying, you know what, we need to stand up something very quickly with just this knowledge to enable our customers or employees to work from home. And in that case, it can be done even faster, probably in 3 to 4. Likewise, I've been involved in projects where we started, for example, with a deployment in one country as part of the digital transformation process, deployed that within the 6 to 8 weeks, but then on a rolling basis are actually widening that out to support different countries, different businesses, etc. And the deployment stretches over a period of months based on the project that's being undergone within the organization itself. So we are talking a couple of months rather than half a year. And I think really key to that is the way that the technology works in terms of out of the box, intelligently being able to start clustering that information. It doesn't require, training times on the knowledge base itself to start providing the right answers.
Fantastic. Another anonymous question. We talked about the importance of compliance in one of the polls. And I think this links very nicely to it. And the question is will the solution be hosted in Australia?
Yes, it will be. So we have hosting environments in Sydney, obviously other places in the world as well, but you asked specifically about Australia. That's one thing we're very cognizant of, is obviously hosting needs to be localized for just those reasons in many cases for compliance.
Fantastic. This was an interesting question. Again, anonymous. If I have a chatbot, do I still need knowledge?
It's a great question. I think a chatbot can mean a lot of things. So I'm gonna take a stab here and sort of talk about the difference between KM and something like conversational AI. So knowledge management is brilliant if what you're trying to do, particularly in self-service, is get the answers out to sort of the 80-20 rule. And in many cases that can be done proactively, contextually, all of those things I was talking about. In many cases, though, it is desirable to actually have that conversational aspect, that contextual conversation. And in that case, I'd say that KM and a bot or IVA work really well together, in that the IVA can actually pull relevant information where it exists within the KM, but then you can start building out those intelligent conversations going forward as and where needed. And it's all about using the right technology at the right point in the customer journey.
Excellent. Another anonymous question. There's lots of people being anonymous today. I might think they want to be mysterious. Do you see the value in integrating LMS with KM so that data gathered in knowledge management is used for training needs analysis and pushing bite-sized learning modules to users?
Absolutely. And it's all about being able to reuse the information. So being able to get the bite-sized bits of information out to whoever is trying to consume them is really critical. So I would say absolutely leverage the information you have regardless of where it is.
Excellent. Again, another anonymous question. So if you have knowledge management exposed on your website, can search engines like Google index, index the content?
Yes, and I think that's really key. Now, I guess I'd put that with the caveat that only if you want it to. I can think of a couple of customers who that wasn't the desirable outcome, so that's fine. But generally, particularly self-service information, where it's in the public domain, most customers nowadays, realistically, do not go to your website if they have a question. They're going to go to Google. So it's really key that whatever information lives within your knowledge base, in a self-service capacity, can be found through that route as well. And so the way that we approach that is Google can absolutely index any of the KM content as individual pages. So individual articles will come back as individual results, and the link takes them directly to your KM system. We have quite a few customers whose Google rankings are increased because of a well-curated knowledge base. And in many cases, that's the #1 route for customers arriving at their website.
Fantastic. One more anonymous question, which is, does your cognitive search work across all industries?
Yes, and that's a good question, actually. So the way that the search works, it has a few different layers. One is sort of, it knows, for example, I like to say it knows that an apple is a fruit that grows on a tree that can be red, green, or yellow, or also a computer, depending on context.
Mm-hmm.
All of that, it gets straight out the box. On top of that, we have specializations according to industry. So say it's travel or retail or financial services that automatically tune it even further. And then obviously there are very specific customizations for your own lexicon, maybe acronyms or something that only exist within your business. But the fundamentals of how that search works, going back to the apple as a fruit that grows on a tree, is actually independent of any particular vertical or sector. And if you sort of look at our customer list, it's quite evenly split across a lot of different industries, specifically for that reason.
Okay, and we've got another question from Paul. Paul wants to know, what is your advice for creating content so that chatbots can find and present short answers? For example, stop creating massive documents or standard operating procedures with lots of images in them that can't be indexed.
Yeah, I think you need to look at it flexibly. So what I will say is that the type of content you're going to want to surface through the chatbot or IVA, as you're just saying, isn't necessarily the same type of content that's going to be useful to your agents or customers, which may actually want the video or link to a YouTube tutorial or a decision tree. So what you need is the flexibility within your KM system is to identify which questions may also require an answer that is bot friendly and be able to store that as well. So you're maintaining one knowledge article, but with different flavors of the answer depending on the channel with which it's being surfaced.
Fantastic. Well, Heather, we're almost at the hour, which means it's almost 2 a.m., I think, at your place. And with that, I would like to ask if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to share with everybody.
Okay. Well, I've absolutely enjoyed presenting and also the discussion. So some great questions. I guess closing remarks would be absolutely appreciate the uniqueness of the situation we all find ourselves in, but also at the same time be looking for technologies that are applicable now and going forward. Really start looking forward as well, not just into the situation we're in now. I think that's very important.
Well, Heather, thank you very much for your generosity and staying up so late. I hope you get allowed to have a sleep in tomorrow morning, or this morning for you. To everybody that attended, stay safe. We're all in this together and we'll come out the other side. Thank you once again to Verint, our national platinum sponsor, for enabling us to access Heather in the UK. And with that, have a great rest of your day wherever you happen to be, and we'll see you next time.